Well, welcome back, folks. Now that we have the exhaust system for the Suzuki TS50 Gaucho project all painted, it's been drying for about a week. I've got it now wrapped up and put away in a nice safe place. You'll be seeing that again a little bit later on, probably this winter or next spring when I mount it on the bike. That'll be one of the last things that probably will go on the bike as we're closing in on finishing this project up. Meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead now and start with other reassembly to the project frame itself. I'm going to start with this little Suzuki two-stroke oil pump right here. Actually, it's made by Mikuni. I need to get the oil pump on first before I can put the countershaft sprocket on, get the chain on, drivetrain, and get some of the other components related to the rear wheel wrapped up once and for all. So there's a little work that needs to be done on this oil pump before I can remount it to the side of the engine, on the left side of the engine. So we're going to set up over here at the bench, and I'll talk that through in a little bit more detail. These are the components for the oil pump assembly: oil pump body, a bushing and a drive gear, and then the banjo fittings and the gasket. And I'll come back and talk to all of these separately. The oil pump body, all I did with this was spray it down with a little brake cleaner to get any residual oil off of it. It was actually pretty clean to begin with. And you can see perhaps right here, these are the original screws, mounting screws. I put them back in the pump body and just used a little piece of copper wire, like you can see right there, and twisted it around the threads so I could keep those screws in their original position. And as you can see here, these screws are in very good condition. They're certainly reusable. So this is pretty much ready to go back on the bike. This little bushing right here fits in over this is the drive sprocket that connects into the engine. It fits together something like that. And this little O-ring right here seals this assembly. There's also, as you can see, a little seal right here. Suzuki does not apparently consider these pumps rebuildable because I could not find some of these parts on the Suzuki parts diagrams. However, Kawasaki does. And since this is a Mikuni pump, and Kawasaki and Suzuki both have used Mikuni pumps for years, Yamaha made their own oil pumps early on. They might have used Mikuni later on, I'm not sure. I haven't worked on any later model Yamaha two-strokes, so I can't really speak to the Yamahas, but Suzuki and Kawasaki used virtually the same oil pumps. So what I did do is I went out and found the parts, this seal and this O-ring on the Kawasaki parts website, and these are the parts right here that I have picked up. And again, these are Kawasaki part numbers, but they're I think you can probably see there, that seal is virtually, or it is identical. It's supplied, no doubt, by Mikuni, who bought it from one of the major seal manufacturers that support the Japanese bike industry. The banjo bolts right here, I do have new washers. Suzuki supplied washers for sealing washers is what they are for the banjo bolts. And I do have a new gasket right here that will fit over the pump body here and seal it up against the engine itself. So I have all those new parts, and here is the new gasket. You can still get that from Suzuki. You can see that right there. That's still available. So what I need to do today, or initially anyway, before I go ahead and put this pump back on the bike, is remove this original O-ring here and this oil seal, and then replace them with the new parts from Kawasaki. Again, they're Mikuni parts actually. And then we can go ahead and put this assembly back on the bike, which will allow me then to get into like reinstalling countershaft sprocket, getting the rear chain on, etc. So let me get some silicone grease here. We will clear some of these items out of the way, and we'll get ready to put a new O-ring and new seal in this little bushing. I think I've got everything ready to go to change this O-ring and this seal right here. I'm going to change the O-ring first. A couple ways you could go about this. You do have to be careful because this is an aluminum alloy of some kind. Could use something like a dental pick, and as you can see, I've got I think even more than this, dental picks that I've picked up over the years. You could use something like this one that's real sharp and get it underneath that O-ring and pry it off. I'm not going to use this because I think it's too sharp. Most of these instruments are. I might be able to get by with something like oh, one of these maybe has a little flatter end to it, something like that. But I'm not going to use dental picks because I think they're too sharp and I don't want to gouge up this alloy. So what I am going to use is just a small flat bladed screwdriver, and I'm just going to, and let me see if I can do this right here for you without getting my head in the way. Just peel that right off like that. And you can see this one is a little bit bigger in diameter than this one. I'm not going to worry about that. This is the used one. So the new one, make sure that that groove is nice and clean, and it is. There's no reason it shouldn't be. You can just take this and just roll it right on. And voila, we've got a new O-ring on there. Now we're going to remove this oil seal right here. Again, here's the new one. And I'm going to have to pry it out with this little screwdriver. You can see I've got black duct tape wrapped around the shank just to protect, again, the alloy. What I'm going to do is get underneath this seal like this, and I'm going to pry it out. Now, I think I'm probably going to have to mount this in my vise because I don't think I'm going to be able to hold it. I don't have enough to get a purchase here and put it in the soft jaws of the vise and then pry it out. So I'm going to go do that right now, and I'll be back in just a second. The seal popped right out. I just held it in the soft jaws of my vise like this so that it couldn't go anywhere. Pried like that, and it popped right out. Again, there's the original in the left hand. There's the new one in the right. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a little bit of silicone grease. You could use any kind of lubricant, 3-in-1 oil, 2-stroke oil, regular motor oil, whatever you prefer. I like working with silicone grease. This is dielectric grease. You've seen me use it before. I'm just going to put a little dielectric grease around the edge of this seal just to make it a little easier to install. Like that. And then we're going to just push it into place with my fingers. Like that. It went right in. I had no problem getting that in. So as you can see there, we got those two pieces put back together. That is, excuse me, the O-ring and the gasket, or I'm sorry, the seal. Getting ahead of myself. And I'm just putting a little bit of silicone, as you can see, on that O-ring to ease it into the pump body right here. Get that screw out of the way. Bingo, you heard it snap into place. So now this is ready to go back on the bike itself. Using, of course, we already talked about, let me find it here somewhere, the new, what I did with it, the new gasket. There it is, right here. There's the new gasket. That will go on the pump. Something like that. I'll get the alignment just right when we get over the bike. I will coat this gasket with anti-seize. You've seen me do that before. That's to make it easier. Well, number one, I think it actually helps seal it better. And number two, it makes it much easier if in the future you have to pull this assembly apart. You don't get the gasket sticking to, usually it'll stick to the engine case itself. But this is all ready to go back on the bike. So we'll set up over there and see if we can't get this assembled. We're set up over at the bike, and there are a couple of things I want to talk about on the oil pump, and then we're going to move up to the engine itself in just a second. The pump itself is all prepped and ready to go. You can see with the screws right here, the mounting screws, got just a touch of anti-seize on each one of these. The banjo bolts, I've got 2 new crush washers on each one of these 2 screws. These are the screws that mount on the pump itself and attach the oil lines to the pump body. Just a little dab of anti-seize on these, along with the new crush washers. These are new from Suzuki. The original crush washers or washers, sealing washers, were plastic. You can see them right here, and they're probably serviceable. You probably still use those, but I'm going to use the new washers I got from Suzuki, and these happen to be aluminum. There are two different kinds of banjo fittings used. These on the pump body itself have a screw in the middle with a gasket behind it, and that's used for bleeding of the system. Once you crack it open and get air introduced, you can, without having to remove the whole fitting, you just loosen that screw out and you can bleed it. The two banjo fittings that attach to the engine, the oil feed lines to the engine block itself, do not have screws, bleed screws, as you can see there. I'll use this 8mm because these are 8mm hex heads. I'll use this 8mm nut driver to tighten everything up. Once I get the pump mounted on the body of the engine, you can see here the drive cog that fits over, like, let me get this there. That will fit into a matching female on the engine side, which we'll see in just a minute. Up here at the engine side, you can see a couple of things. Number one, I've got the gasket already in place. Again, it has anti-seize on both sides. And in fact, anti-seize is what's holding this in place right now in position. You'll also notice these oil lines. These are the feed lines that go from the oil pump, which will mount right in here, up to the engine block. You'll notice those are loose. I do not have them secured in place with their grommets. I want these to float and be flexible so I can get behind there and mount this pump body in place and not have to worry about stressing these oil lines. So that was intentional on my part, and let me just make sure they are out of the way. So you can see here, I think, there you go, the oil pump, and you can see right in here the spot where this drive cog will fit. Let me get this up here so you can see right there what that looks like. Like that. So now I've got to get the positioning of this cog, this drive cog, in the right position to match up with that drive mechanism on the inside of the engine. And now you'll see why I wanted these oil lines to be flexible and out of my way. So let's see if we can do this, and I can keep my head out of your way so you can see what I'm doing. Pull my screws back a bit. If I can get those located or started. When you tighten these screws up, be reasonable, but reasonably tight. I'm just going to use a screwdriver. I'm not torquing anything down, though there might be a torque setting for this. I'm going by feel, and I got everything all put together the way I want it there. Now it's simply a matter of fitting these oil lines into place. And again, I'm going to leave this grommet loose right now, and I'm going to just finagle these oil pump lines here a little bit. Take the banjo bolts. Again, there's a washer that goes on each side of this fitting. keep my head out of your line of sight. And I will start them by hand. And the second one, same thing. You see why I want that loose, so I can move that around without stressing those plastic lines. And then use my nut driver just to snug these up. Got to be careful with these fittings because you are dealing with an aluminum alloy. And I would rather have them leak and have to snug them up later than over tighten and strip them. So that's basically the oil pump. And then the cable will come down through the top here, hook onto the arm and actuate the pump this way from the throttle. I can now go ahead and mount the countershaft sprocket and get the chain on and get all of that put together. These last two banjo bolts, which will attach up here to the engine, up here and on the other side, I will mount later. I'm not going to worry about those right now. I'm going to have to fiddle around and get now this grommet in place, etc. And I'll do that off camera because I'm going to certainly get my head in the way otherwise when I try to get in there to see. I think we're going to call this video a close right now, folks. I think it's long enough. I've showed you, it's really a very simple process of mounting the oil pump, two-stroke oil pump on the Suzuki. It's very similar on pretty much every other Japanese Enduro from this era. Any issues, questions, thoughts, drop me a note. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching.